A judge publicly fined her concerning a small cross necklace, believing she was simply another person present. However, when she rose and spoke, the entire courtroom became quiet, and the subsequent events left even the bailiff astonished. Alana Merriweather did not go to the Rutherford County Courthouse, anticipating conflict. She went to support her younger cousin, Deshawn, who'd been arrested following a routine traffic stop that had escalated into a considerably larger matter. She requested a day of leave from work, chose a navy blue blouse, slacks, and flats. The outfit was simple and understated, yet respectful. A delicate gold chain with a small cross hung around her neck. It was not ostentatious, barely noticeable unless one looked closely. Someone did notice. The courtroom was full. It contained people awaiting their turns, lawyers reviewing documents, and deputies positioned along the walls. Alana settled into the second row, remaining quiet and composed. Her purse rested in her lap. She nodded softly to her cousin, who appeared exhausted from stress, his eyes weighed down by fatigue. He remained silent, offering her a look of thanks. That was sufficient. Judge Raymond Keller entered with his characteristic formal walk. The judge was known for a particular demeanor. Across Murfreesboro and in surrounding areas, lawyers spoke of his meticulous nature, traditional, direct, and unyielding. A Vietnam veteran who transitioned to a legal career, he regarded the courtroom as a space of great importance. His space. The bailiff called the room to order. Before proceeding, Judge Keller addressed the room, looking at the attendees as he said, "I'd like to address a matter of decorum." He looked directly at Alana. "You, ma'am, the one in blue. Please rise." Alana blinked, surprised, and slowly stood. Her heart thudded a little faster, but she kept her posture straight. "You're wearing a religious symbol," he said, his voice firm. "That's not permitted in my courtroom. Neutrality matters here." A fine of $50 was levied for disrupting court decorum. The room fell silent. Some individuals adjusted in their seats. Others averted their gaze, visibly uncomfortable. Alana did not respond immediately. She was familiar with being publicly singled out, questioned, and dismissed, yet she still felt surprised. A fine? For wearing a necklace? She glanced at the bailiff, then back to the judge. "Your Honor," she stated calmly, "is this a published policy? Could you please direct me to the statute or court rule that permits that penalty?" Keller showed no visible reaction. "This is my courtroom. I established the procedures." Alana nodded thoughtfully. "I comprehend that, sir. However, are those procedures documented anywhere?" He fixed his gaze on her for a brief moment. "You may pay the fine at the clerk's desk, or you may depart." She detected a quiet intake of breath from someone seated behind her. Alana remained still. She did not speak louder. She did not engage in debate. She merely inclined her head slightly and stated, "I am not leaving." A gentleman in the front row, an older man wearing a tan suit, lifted his eyebrow. His gaze moved from her to Judge Keller and back again. Judge Keller slowly straightened his robe. "Then you will be held in contempt?" The bailiff subtly changed his stance. The prosecutor set aside his file. A palpable change occurred. The atmosphere felt denser, not with theatrics, but with focused concentration. Alana released a single breath through her nose. "I'm here to support my cousin, Deshawn Grissom. The charges are being formally presented today, and he requested my presence. I'm not intending to cause any disturbance, Your Honor. However, I contend that this fine is not only unjust, but potentially unlawful." Judge Keller moved forward a little. "Did you question my jurisdiction?" Her expression remained unchanged. "I am requesting an explanation of the policy and its legal basis." He hesitated briefly. It was slight, almost unnoticeable, but the pause was present. He did not anticipate that. "Who are you?" he inquired, his voice growing tense. "My name is Alana Merriweather," she replied, "and I'm a constitutional attorney licensed in 3 states, including Tennessee." The courtroom cracked open. You could almost feel the collective intake of breath. Someone whispered under their breath, "Damn." She continued, measured and composed. "I graduated from Harvard Law School in 2010. I've worked for the Southern Center for Human Rights, and I currently serve as senior counsel at a nonprofit based in Memphis. I am present as a family member, but I understand the law and I am aware of my rights. Keller relaxed back in his chair. For the first time, he appeared uneasy, not angry, simply unsteady. She could have smiled. She refrained. The ensuing silence was palpable. The judge began to speak, but stopped, instead rearranging the papers on his desk. However, the judge was unaware of who he was addressing. Alana did not grow up with wealth. She was raised in Jackson, Mississippi, in a faded brick duplex off of Robinson Road. Denise, her mother, held overnight shifts at the Willow Creek nursing home, and her father left when she was 8. Resources were scarce, but a set of principles guided them. Speak with clarity. Avoid minimizing your worth. Assert yourself when injustice occurs, but maintain composure and a dignified demeanor. By the age of 16, Alana had studied the Constitution from beginning to end on 2 separate occasions. She sought to comprehend the disparate treatment experienced by individuals like herself in courtrooms, offices, stores, and even churches. Her motivation wasn't anger, but rather a genuine curiosity. There was also a deeper element at play, a quiet determination. People consistently underestimated her, not only due to her brown skin or her choice to wear her hair natural, but also in subtle ways, like overlooking her in meetings. She remembered the way older male attorneys would address her as young lady, within rooms filled with men experiencing thinning hair and fragile egos. She quickly understood that possessing brilliance was insufficient. There were times when it needed to be carried quietly, allowing them to believe they were more astute, until they unwittingly stepped into a carefully constructed plan. When Alana was accepted into Harvard Law, it felt less like a joyous occasion and more like a validation. She had previously informed her high school counselor that her aspiration was to become a civil rights attorney. A genuine laugh escaped her. Then, she cautioned that law school presented fierce competition and wasn't necessarily a viable option. Alana remained silent. She simply intensified her studies. While attending Harvard, she wasn't boisterous. She found no need to be. She consistently occupied the front row of each constitutional law class, rapidly taking notes and posing questions that caused professors to pause. People began to observe her, yet still regarded her as unusual. This perception never felt satisfactory to her. After graduating, she declined 2 offers from large firms seeking impactful work. She spent several years in Alabama, defending minors within the legal system. Then, she moved to Memphis to join a nonprofit dedicated to combating housing discrimination. While she didn't gain widespread recognition, her work secured people's release from jail and kept families in their homes, transforming lives. Throughout this, she consistently wore her small gold cross, a deeply personal symbol. The brooch had been her grandmother's, accompanied by a handwritten note. It read, "Wear this when you need to be reminded you're not alone." Her grandmother never removed it. Not once. Not even in court. Therefore, when Judge Keller singled her out, calling her out as if she were a disruptive teenager in detention, it didn't unsettle her. It evoked memories of the instances she's experienced being looked at and not truly seen. They never anticipated her. They anticipated the boisterous one, the angry one. There was someone poised to lash out or leave abruptly. Instead, they experienced something else entirely, a demonstration of precision, control, and strength through composure. This wasn't unprecedented. In 2017, within a courtroom in Little Rock, she observed a public defender struggle during a bail hearing. The judge seemed disengaged. The defendant, a 19-year-old facing trespassing charges at an abandoned building, was on the verge of being assigned $1,500 bail, an amount he was unlikely to afford. Alana rose, introduced herself, and referenced 3 Arkansas statutes that the judge seemed to have missed. The judge conceded. Bail was waived. The defendant was released that same day. That demonstrated her character. Consequently, sitting in Rutherford County, facing a fine for a necklace of great personal significance, before a judge who believed he could compel her to be silent, Alana remained steadfast. She straightened her posture. When she introduced herself to the courtroom, her name, her qualifications, her purpose for being present, it wasn't intended for Judge Keller. It was directed toward everyone who perceived her as simply someone's relative. However, today wasn't a day when silence was an option. The courtroom remained quiet for an unusually long time. Judge Keller shuffled papers, seemingly stalling. But Alana remained still, her hands clasped before her, patiently waiting. Not contesting, merely waiting. From the far corner, the prosecutor subtly adjusted his posture, his fingers still. The bailiff's gaze moved between Keller and Alana. A change was palpable. The room's power dynamic had altered. It wasn't solely emanating from the bench. Keller spoke, clearing his throat. This court will proceed with the next case. He refrained from mentioning the fine again, at least for now. However, the absence of his usual reprimand was keenly observed. Deshawn's case was then called. He remained standing, still wearing the wrinkled button-down shirt from county lockup. He looked at Alana, his eyes reflecting both pride and concern. She offered him a singular, composed glance, a look conveying, "Don't panic. I've got this." The public defender approached the table. However, before he could speak, Alana moved forward. "Your Honor," she stated distinctly, "with the court's permission, I would like to represent Mr. Grissom today. I've reviewed the charges and spoken with him. He desires me to stand in his defense." Judge Keller looked up. "You aren't listed as counsel. I presented my bar card. My Tennessee license is current. You can verify with the Board of Professional Responsibility I am listed as Alana Joy Merriweather." He paused a moment too long and then nodded once. "Proceed." Alana moved to stand beside Deshawn. Her cousin appeared to want to laugh and cry simultaneously. She placed one hand gently on his shoulder as she turned to address the court. Mr. Grissom was stopped due to a non-functioning tail light. The arrest report indicates he was asked to leave the vehicle and subjected to a search without consent. No warrant was present. The officer's statement made no mention of probable cause. Additionally, the encounter progressed to resisting arrest when he inquired about the reason for being handcuffed. He did not raise his voice, nor did he threaten anyone. She retrieved a document from her purse. "I've submitted a written motion to dismiss, supported by 3 Tennessee Supreme Court rulings. Each affirms that a warrantless search under these circumstances constitutes a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Additionally, the resisting arrest charge lacks supporting video evidence, despite officers wearing department-issued body cams." The room was still again. Alana frowned, leaned back, and accepted the motion from the clerk. He reviewed it. It was evident. With a rapid scan of the room and a slight twitch of his jaw, Alana remained silent. She stood motionless, allowing him to read, while ensuring her presence was undeniable. Behind her, people subtly adjusted their positions, not from disinterest, but from focused attention. This was no longer the woman they believed was in distress just moments prior. This was a different person altogether. Judge Keller looked up. "You wrote this motion yourself?" "I did. I prepared this draft last night following a review of the police report and a conversation regarding the arrest with Mr. Grissom, and I am not affiliated with a law firm. I am employed by a civil rights nonprofit. Our organization focuses on due process violations, housing discrimination, and wrongful convictions." The judge tapped the motion lightly on the desk. "Your client's record? No prior arrests. No violent offenses. He's a full-time electrician's apprentice, simply trying to get to work on time the day this occurred." Another long silence. Keller turned to the prosecutor. "State's position?" The prosecutor paused. "We'd be willing to dismiss the resisting charge, maintain the traffic infraction." Alana spoke again, her voice resolute. "We'd agree to that only with the court confirmation that the search was unlawful. Mr. Grissom deserves that documented." It was a confident move. No apologies. No hesitation. Simply a direct, justifiable request supported by legal precedent. Keller observed her. The courtroom rarely witnessed such assertiveness. A woman, a black woman, effortlessly navigating legal procedures. She did so without displaying anger or arrogance, simply presenting clear and precise facts. He adjusted his glasses. The motion to dismiss was granted. The traffic infraction remains with a warning, and no fines will be assessed. Alana offered a subtle nod, devoid of a smile or celebratory gestures. She then turned to Deshawn. "You're free to go." He paused momentarily, as if his body needed time to process the news. Subsequently, he left the defendant's table and embraced her firmly. A murmur rippled through the courtroom once more. It wasn't regarding the case itself, but about her. However, what Alana did next silenced everyone. Instead of returning to her place, she faced the bench, her voice remaining calm. "Before I sit down, Your Honor, I would like to formally challenge the fine issued earlier this morning." Keller visibly recoiled, as if startled. "Do you want to reopen that matter?" he asked. "Yes, sir," she replied. "You stated that religious symbols were not permitted in your courtroom. However, unless this courtroom is functioning under martial law, the First Amendment remains applicable." Her tone was measured. She did not need to raise her voice. In County of Allegheny versus ACLU, the Supreme Court underscored the requirement for government institutions to maintain neutrality rather than hostility towards religion. Prohibiting a small cross pendant, particularly from an individual who is not testifying or speaking to the court at that moment, does not represent neutrality. The action appeared as targeted suppression, and the gallery had gone completely still. Alana advanced 1 foot. Additionally, there was no written policy displayed, no public signage indicating the ban, and no prior warning provided. "I am found without citation, without precedent, and without any attempt to verify my intent or role in the proceedings." Keller adjusted in his seat. His face had lost some of its typical composure. One could observe something stirring behind his eyes: calculation, doubt, perhaps even shame. "Are you suggesting the court violated your rights?" he inquired. Alana remained motionless. "I am not making accusations. I am presenting established facts. I request the fine be rescinded, and the court record should indicate that this incident transpired outside established protocol." The prosecutor glanced up momentarily, then resumed, looking down. The bailiff's hands were now clasped before him, his jaw tense, and his posture more formal. Keller hesitated before replying. He fixed his gaze on her for a prolonged, intense period. Then he announced, "The fine is withdrawn." This wouldn't be documented. Alana offered a brief nod. "Thank you, Your Honor." She pivoted and proceeded to her place with composure. Murmurs arose once more. However, this time, they weren't filled with uncertainty. Instead, they conveyed interest and deference. A woman seated behind her silently asked another, "Who is she?" Alana remained uninvolved. She simply took her seat, retrieved her notebook, and gently opened it to a fresh page. The judge, for the first time that morning, seemed to be truly contemplating. His movements became more deliberate. He examined the files with greater attention. The issue he's ignited by the fine for the necklace had escalated. It had become something more significant. The prosecutor spoke quietly to the bailiff, who acknowledged with a nod and jotted a note. The shift was noticeable. Court reconvened. Several more cases were heard. However, the usual flow was disrupted. The observers were no longer focused on the legal charges. Their gazes repeatedly returned to Alana Merriweather, the woman who had corrected a judge without raising her voice. 30 minutes elapsed. Then, unexpectedly, Judge Keller called for a brief recess. He rose and exited through the side door silently. Alana remained seated. The bailiff approached her slowly. "Mom," he said, softer than previously, "may I pose a question to you?" She turned her head slightly. "Of course. Did you anticipate that occurring? Regarding the fine? Concerning everything?" Alana emitted the slightest laugh through her nose. "No, I was unaware of that, but I wasn't willing to ignore it." The bailiff touched the back of his neck. "I've been here for 8 years," he said. "Never seen him back down like that." "He's not a bad man," she said softly. "But power without accountability is dangerous," he agreed. It wasn't a matter of obligation, but comprehension. Further down the hall, 2 court reporters spoke quietly. The younger one appeared visibly shaken. She was familiar with every case, reciting them easily. "Lawyer?" one asked. "Yes, from Harvard. Can you believe that?" She attended to support her cousin and unexpectedly challenged the judge. The courtroom observers expressed disbelief. However, Alana felt no sense of triumph. She found no pleasure in undermining someone. Her purpose wasn't to shame Keller. She simply sought justice. When it was lacking, she created it herself, carefully and deliberately. Yet, a subtle shift began to appear in Judge Keller's gaze. Upon his return to the courtroom, Judge Keller seemed altered. His posture lacked its previous rigidity. He appeared unchanged in stature, simply quieter. No longer seemed a man attempting to maintain authority, but rather someone attempting to grasp how he relinquished it without awareness. He took a seat, adjusted his glasses, and proceeded to the next case. Even his voice had diminished in tone. It was subtly altered, almost imperceptible to an ordinary observer, yet Alana recognized it. She had witnessed this previously. Men in positions of influence struggling with a reality they resisted acknowledging. That they had transgressed a boundary, and someone unanticipated had retaliated. As the courtroom emptied and people moved towards the exit, Keller remained seated on the bench, his gaze fixed forward. Alana collected her belongings and was nearing the door when she heard him call out, "Ms. Merriweather." She paused and turned, her face showing no emotion. He rose from his seat and descended the steps deliberately, as if considering each one. "I'd like a word, if you're willing." The bailiff seemed uneasy, questioning whether this was a directive or a private inquiry. Alana offered a subtle nod, then turned to Deshawn. "Give me 5, she murmured to him. Keller refrained from escorting her into chambers. They remained just outside the vacant courtroom, maintaining enough distance for some discretion, yet remaining visible. He cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology." Alana didn't reply. Not yet. She allowed him to formulate his thoughts. "I formed an assumption," he proceeded, "an inequitable one, regarding your intentions, regarding your position. I was mistaken," she responded gently, but without resentment. He lowered his gaze. "That's the difficulty, isn't it? One shouldn't need to be." Another pause. "I have dedicated 32 years to that bench," Keller stated, "and I have valued order, structure, neutrality. But you help me understand, occasionally what we consider neutral is simply convenient for those already in power." The statement impacted him more profoundly than anticipated. Alana simply looked at him, maintaining steady, respectful eye contact. There was no trace of ego, only honesty in her silence. "I don't expect forgiveness," he stated, "but I will say this. I won't forget today." Alana offered a slight nod. "That's all I hoped for." She prepared to leave, but he called out to her one last time. "If you're ever back in Murfreesboro, I'd be honored to hear you argue again." That element genuinely surprised her. "I hope not to need to," she replied, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. They both understood the unspoken meaning behind her words. The sun had risen higher, and the heat was intense. Deshawn stood near the sidewalk, looking at his phone. He brightened when he saw her. "What is that?" he asked, astonished. Alana shrugged, retrieving her keys from her purse. "Just a small civics lesson." "Seriously, you confronted a judge. In his home." She gave him a look. "Don't make it sound heroic. I didn't go there to fight. I want to hear what he had to say." When someone attempts to diminish your importance for reasons related to your identity, you face a choice. Remain silent or voice your perspective. Deshawn leaned against her car, nodding slowly. "I swear, if I didn't know you better, I'd say you rehearsed that," I remarked. She laughed. "I didn't, but maybe I should start writing it down." At that moment, a local reporter from the Murfreesboro News Journal approached, holding a voice recorder and a notebook. "Ms. Merriweather?" Alana turned. I observed what unfolded. "Our readers would likely appreciate hearing your perspective. Would you consider an interview?" She looked at Deshawn, then returned her gaze to the reporter. "Let me consider that." The reporter offered her a card and stepped back. "You prompted considerable thought today. Such occurrences are infrequent in court." As I walked toward the car, Deshawn remarked, "They will discuss this, you know." Alana shrugged again. "Let them, however." What transpired outside the courtroom held equal significance. As Alana and Deshawn arrived at his apartment complex on the west side of Murfreesboro, his phone was constantly buzzing. Calls, texts, and even direct messages flooded in. A cousin in Chattanooga had already learned the news. A friend from high school had sent a screenshot of a local news blog displaying the headline: Attorney silently dismantles courtroom bias. Judge withdraws fine, dismisses case. Deshawn looked at her, his eyes wide. It's already on the internet? Alana offered a small smile. I mentioned to you, people discuss events, particularly when expectations aren't met. She did not seek recognition. Not currently. Not in the past. However, there were occasions when being noticed wasn't a decision. It was a consequence of acting correctly when the option of remaining unnoticed wasn't available. Afterward that evening, she was at her kitchen table, drinking tea, the small cross necklace still on her collarbone. Her inbox contained numerous messages, some from familiar people, others from unknown individuals. Several legal blogs had already published summaries. A user on Twitter had shared a clip from the live stream, adding the caption, "This is how you correct injustice," without ever raising your voice. However, Alana wasn't paying attention to any of that. She was considering a statement from Judge Keller. What we often consider neutral is simply convenient for those already wielding the authority. That observation resonated with her. She recalled her childhood, holding her grandmother's hand during evening church service. The pastor's words resonated. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is not shout. It's stand. Initially, it seemed like a poetic statement. Now it felt genuine. The following day, she returned to her position at the nonprofit office in Memphis. Her colleagues did not alter their behavior toward her. There were no celebratory balloons or enthusiastic applause. Instead, one of the interns presented her with a file and requested she review a housing complaint by noon. She appreciated the normalcy of it. Information still circulated, even without her direct involvement. A week later, she received a call from the Middle Tennessee State University Law Department. They were planning a community forum concerning courtroom ethics and bias, and a member of their board had recommended her as a speaker. She nearly declined. Nearly. Then she recalled the courtroom, the shift in people's gaze when they recognized her as an individual, and how many others remained voiceless, awaiting someone to advocate for them. Consequently, she consented to participate in the forum. 14 days later, a pastor from a church in Smyrna contacted her. He requested that she address their youth group regarding the law, its true meaning, its protective function, and how it can be applied equitably if individuals understand how to ensure its accountability. She accepted the invitation. She continued to agree, not due to enjoying the focus, but because the narrative was no longer solely hers. It belonged to all who had ever occupied the rear of a courtroom and considered, "They won't hear me." She had never shared this with Keller. However, that day had also altered her. She frequently reflected on him. She questioned whether he retained that moment within his memory as she did. If he ever observed someone in his courtroom differently afterward, perhaps with increased consideration, perhaps with a touch more humility. She hoped so. One Friday afternoon, as she was leaving the office, she noticed an envelope affixed to her door. It bore no name and no return address, only her name typed neatly. Inside was a brief note that read, "Ms. Merriweather, I've revised the courtroom conduct guidelines. Religious attire or symbols, unless disruptive, will no longer be penalized." That was all. There was no apology. No signature appeared beyond the initials. Yet it was sufficient. She folded the note and placed it within her grandmother's Bible. Alana Merriweather didn't seek recognition. She desired equity. Certain narratives briefly capture attention before fading. Others resonate deeply, altering perspectives, even without direct interaction with the individual who initiated that change. For Alana Merriweather, that courtroom moment represented not a culmination, but a segment within a more extensive narrative. A narrative encompassing decisions largely unseen by others. For instance, staying up all night to assist a tenant contesting an unlawful eviction. Dealing with late-night calls from worried mothers whose sons were detained without bail. Or traveling 3 hours to a courthouse in Jackson simply to observe a judge who was reported to be unfairly treating defendants with limited financial resources. She made no introductions. She simply observed, documented her findings, and waited for discernible trends to emerge. When questioned about her composure and restraint in the face of disrespect, she consistently replied, "I know what I carry." She didn't need to demonstrate its weight to show it was heavy. That courtroom didn't alter her. It simply reinforced why she selected this profession initially. Not for recognition, not for retribution, for respect. She had no desire to embarrass Judge Keller. She aimed to make him consider. And in that, she was successful. Some time passed, and during a talk with a group of teenage girls at a public charter school in Memphis, one of them asked, "Weren't you the woman who spoke directly to the judge and caused him to appear mistaken?" Alana responded with a smile. "I didn't speak directly to him. I spoke with purpose. And I didn't cause him to appear mistaken. I offered him an opportunity to reconsider." The girls seemed surprised. "Isn't that essentially the same thing?" Alana replied, "Not in the slightest." Several of the girls chuckled, but a few seemed to take her words to heart. Those were the ones she intended to reach. She continued, "The goal isn't to win arguments. It's to win ground, so the next person doesn't have to fight the same fight." That resonated with them, just as it resonated with her. She understood her story might disappear from news feeds. The tweets, the blogs, the clipped videos, they'd all be lost eventually. But someone would remember. Someone in the gallery who witnessed that moment unfold. Someone who'd felt invisible that day and walked out feeling a little stronger. That was sufficient. Some individuals enter a space seeking attention. Others, like Alana, enter, communicate with precision, and leave a lasting impact. The gold cross remained a daily adornment. She would be prepared again if another courtroom attempted to challenge its presence. For invariably, someone will attempt to diminish you to align with their expectations. And equally, a decision will always present itself, to diminish or to stand, to speak or to allow silence to convey your message. She elected to stand, with insight, not with empty words, not with arrogance, but with a clear objective. And that's what caused people to recall, not that she achieved victory, but how she achieved it. If this narrative resonated with you even slightly, if it prompted thought, emotion, or introspection, then please don't keep it private. Subscribe, distribute it, and help spread it. You never know when your steady voice might be the one that transforms the atmosphere. Laughter followed the reserved girl, until a video appeared showing her protecting herself with remarkable composure, shifting the opinions of both Roosevelt High and the online community against her tormentor. If you inquired among the students at Roosevelt High about who held sway in the corridors, the response would invariably be one name: Brielle Wentworth. 17 years old, known for her quick wit and consistently ahead of the latest trends, Brielle was more than a senior. She was the senior. Brielle's father was a prominent corporate attorney in Sacramento, while her mother managed a luxury staging company for real estate. Their home in El Dorado Hills had been featured in a spread showcasing modern home design. She drove a graphite Range Rover, sported limited edition sneakers that were yet to be released, and possessed a TikTok following exceeding that of many local influencers. To those outside, Brielle appeared to have everything, and she was content with that perception. Each morning presented an opportunity for a performance. She entered school with a graceful, almost effortless stride. Impeccable hair, perfect lashes, AirPods in, iced coffee in hand. Girls aspired to be her. Boys observed her every move. Teachers expressed frustration, but even they acknowledged her intelligence. Just intelligent enough to avoid failing, never quite striving hard enough to fully challenge herself. That fall, senior year was progressing exactly as she'd envisioned. Prom committee, brand collaborations, homecoming queen virtually assured. No one jeopardized her position until Ayanna Brooks walked in. She arrived without fanfare, no elaborate smile, no designer handbag, just a simple canvas backpack, her braided hair neatly pulled back, and a subtle acknowledgement to the teacher. She had transferred from a charter school in Vallejo. A full scholarship based on academic merit was the extent of what anyone initially knew. She took a seat 2 rows in front of Brielle in AP Literature, and within the first week, Murmurs began regarding her already achieving the highest grade in the class. Within 2 weeks, Mr. Daniels read aloud one of Ayana's essays, not only to check for grammar, but because it genuinely affected him. Brielle disapproved of this. She didn't voice it, but a slight movement of her lip betrayed her feelings. The way her eyes focused intently when Ayana responded to questions without notes, and the subtle sound she made when Mr. Daniels asked her to expand on what Ayana had just said, all revealed her discomfort. Brielle had witnessed many new girls arrive and depart. Attractive girls, intelligent girls, unusual girls, but Ayana was unlike any she's seen before. She made no effort to compete. She didn't flirt with teachers or seek attention, and that, in turn, made her stand out. In the cafeteria, Ayana sat alone, not in a way that suggested sadness, but more as if she preferred it. She read during lunch, sometimes with earbuds in, sometimes not, consistently calm and unreadable. Brielle found it difficult to tolerate her composure. "She's acting like she's better than everyone," Brielle muttered to her friend Mackenzie one afternoon. Near the gym's vending machines, they stood. Mackenzie chewed her gum and gave a slight lift of her shoulders. She appeared reserved, perhaps even timid, Brielle observed. "No," Brielle stated directly. "She's strategic. One doesn't adopt an aura of innocence and grace unless it's intentional, meant to attract attention." This wasn't envy, Brielle reassured herself. It was about maintaining control. If others began to admire Ayana's intelligence and composed demeanor, what would that signify for her? And what of the carefully constructed persona she had cultivated? It began subtly, with hushed comments near Ayana's locker. Remarks like, "Oh wow, did you bring your thesis today?" Manufactured gasps occurred during roll call when Ayana's name was called in multiple AP classes. There were also sarcastic comments about her library clothes and her perceived religious demeanor. Ayana remained unfazed. She consistently attended, excelled on every quiz, and navigated the halls as if the behavior didn't affect her. Even when Brielle made eye contact and smirked, she received no response. However, this only escalated the situation. Brielle craved a reaction. She desired control. What she couldn't control worried her. However, a change was imminent, and not the kind Brielle anticipated. It began with Brielle posing a question just loud enough to be heard. Does she even talk? Or does she just blink Morse code? This occurred during AP statistics. Several students laughed quietly. Ayana looked to the side, but continued her work. Mr. Fielding remained silent, but hesitated noticeably before resuming the lesson. Brielle smiled, and the others followed suit. She had established the atmosphere. Things became less difficult after that. It was almost natural, a contrived cough whenever Ayana entered class. Disdainful eye rolls when she raised her hand. Brielle even began imitating the way Ayana sat, back straight, legs crossed, hands folded, in an exaggerated and cartoonish way, just enough for her friends to erupt in laughter. Ayana made no reply, but she was aware. Naturally, she was aware. During one afternoon in the library, Ayana was seated by the window, working on calculus problems. A junior, Sean, pulled a chair over to her and sat down without permission. "You don't talk much, huh?" he said. She looked up. "I talk, just not when I don't need to." "You think you're better than everyone? Or are you just antisocial?" She replied, "I think I'm trying to study." He scoffed, stood up, and walked away. Two girls near the printer chuckled. One of them murmured, "Attitude on silent mode." Ayana didn't react visibly, though her pencil paused. Later that evening at home, her mother observed that she was uncharacteristically subdued. "You all right, sweetie?" she inquired, serving rice. Ayana offered a slight movement of her shoulders. "The usual?" Her mom regarded her with a knowing glance, the kind reserved for moments when a child is troubled but not ready to share. Meanwhile, in El Dorado Hills, Brielle was eating dinner with her mom, checking TikTok while pushing around salmon she hadn't requested. "I heard the new girl aced the chem test," her mom said, not looking up from her phone. "Cool," Brielle replied. "Maybe she could tutor you." Brielle looked up slowly. "What?" "You know, if you want to bring your grade up before early decision apps are due." "She's not even applying to the same schools as me." How do you know? I just know. Her mom didn't push further, but Brielle's jaw stayed clenched the rest of the meal. Back at school, the teasing moved into group chats. A meme depicting Ayana studying by herself during lunch circulated online, accompanied by the caption, plotting her next essay to destroy us all. It spread through private stories, appeared repeatedly in comment sections, and evolved into a shared joke. Publicly, no one defended her. However, Ethan Mercado, a reserve student from AV Club, approached her at her locker one afternoon. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked. She looked up, visibly surprised. "Yeah, why?" She replied. "I've seen what's being said," he stated, "and I don't participate in the laughter." She nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said. He paused. "Have you ever wanted company during lunch? Or something similar?" She didn't confirm, but she didn't decline either. Regardless, the stares continued. The whispers persisted, and Brielle kept observing, always from a distance, attempting to understand why Ayana wasn't faltering. Then, one day in lit class, Mr. Daniels made an error. He returned essays. Ayana's received a 99. Brielle's received a 72. He didn't comment verbally, simply distributing the papers as normal. However, Brielle noticed the grades and became upset. "Did you even read mine?" she asked, her voice sharp. The room fell silent. Mr. Daniels blinked. "Excuse me? You gave her a 99, and mine barely passes." Brielle responded, "If you have a question about your grade, we can discuss it after class," she said dismissively. "Whatever," he muttered. She kept her eyes on the desk, her pen tapping lightly. After class, Ethan approached Ayana again. "She's scared of you, you know." Ayana shook her head. "She just doesn't understand me. She doesn't want to." This was a critical moment. Brielle felt a surge of fear, knowing she was on the verge of an action that would dramatically alter circumstances. This time, the entire student body of Meadowbrook High would witness it. Thursday afternoon felt interminable, heavy with humidity. The air conditioning in the school cafeteria had been unreliable throughout the week, contributing to an already strained atmosphere. Brielle, feeling listless and agitated, rested her chin on her hand, gazing across the room at Ayana from her tray of uneaten chicken nuggets. Ayana was in her usual spot, near the far windows, eating quietly with a paperback, Things Fall Apart, beside her tray. Brielle scowled. "Naturally, she's reading something with a title like that," she murmured. Mackenzie looked up, questioning. "You're still focused on this. She seems to think she's special." "Exactly," Brielle retorted. "And people are treating that like it's a positive thing." Mackenzie paused. "So, are you suggesting you want to throw food at her?" "No," Brielle stated. She wanted to allow her a brief pause. It was then that the concept began to develop. She involved Zach and Nina, two juniors eager to gain her favor. They possessed access to the AV Club's green screen equipment and a copy of the morning announcements video. Within less than a day, they created a fabricated segment. Ayana's face was superimposed onto an old news anchor's body, accompanied by robotic audio. The title read, "Ayana Brooks proclaims herself queen of Roosevelt High." It was foolish, yet well executed. It appeared remarkably authentic. The strategy? To broadcast it during morning announcements just before the start of second period. And it succeeded. Initially, that Friday morning, immediately following the Pledge of Allegiance, the video began playing. For a moment, many students paused, visibly confused. Then laughter erupted. It was loud, unpleasant, and reverberated through the hallways. Ayana was in third period English when she heard about it. A sophomore rushed into the classroom, holding a phone, and showed her the video. "Yo, Ayana, did you see this?" he said, still laughing. She didn't respond. She simply looked at the screen, her own face appearing warped, her voice sounding mechanical and derisive. She blinked once, then closed her eyes firmly, as if attempting to erase everything. Afterward that day, Brielle encountered her in the hall. "Hey," she said gently, "I enjoyed your short presentation this morning." Ayana halted her movement, turned deliberately. Their eyes connected, truly connected for the first time. And for a brief instant, Brielle sensed something. Not regret, but a trace of doubt. As if she wasn't certain anymore who held the advantage. That night, Ayana sat at the kitchen table, her laptop closed, tea growing cold beside her. Her mom sat across from her. They're messing with you again? Ayana nodded. You want me to call someone? No, it'll make it worse. Her mom leaned forward. Baby, what they're doing isn't just teasing anymore. It's harassment. Ayana's jaw clenched. They're waiting for me to snap. I'm not giving them that. Her mom studied her face. You sure? Ayana's voice was low. I'm sure. Her hands trembled beneath the table. The following morning, she arrived at school wearing black leggings and a plain hoodie. She carried nothing but her phone, no books, no backpack. She proceeded directly past the main office, bypassing her locker, and headed straight to the gym. There, she sat silently on the bleachers as the warm-ups began. The girls' volleyball team observed her. Coach Ramirez noticed her and came over. Ayana, is everything all right? He asked. I just need to use the gym after school. Is that a problem? He appeared puzzled but nodded. There were only 15 minutes between practice and basketball. That was all the time she had. She thanked him, and she waited. After school, Ayana returned. Coach had left the mats out. She took one to the center of the floor and placed her bag next to it. For the subsequent 15 minutes, she moved. Fluidly, sharply, powerfully. Snap kicks, elbow strikes, pivot turns. Breathe. Reset. Again. There wasn't any music. There was no audience. Just motion. Just discipline. She was unaware that someone had entered. She was completely unaware that he had recorded it. It was Ethan. He remained silent, simply observing. His hand trembled almost imperceptibly as he pressed record. Later that night, he posted a 19-second clip with the caption, "They picked the wrong one." No tags, no names, just movement, precision, focus. The video quickly gained attention, and once it spread, nothing at Roosevelt would ever be the same. By Monday morning, the clip had reached over 200,000 views. No names, no faces. A young woman in a hoodie moved with the precision of an action film star. Her movements were seamless, accurate, and completely controlled. The video gained widespread attention on TikTok, sparking numerous reactions. Users created stitched videos attempting to replicate her kicks, and the comment section was filled with speculation. Who was she? She executed every movement flawlessly. It was evident she had received training, though at Roosevelt High, the truth wasn't widely known. Not yet. In first period, Brielle was seated with her feet resting on the desk, using her phone. She watched the video, paused, and tilted her head. She looks familiar, she muttered. By lunch, someone had made the connection. Ayana's name began circulating through the halls again. But this time, the tone was different. Less ridicule, more inquisitiveness, and something else Brielle hadn't experienced before. Respect. She's the one from the video. I thought she was just a nerd. Yo, she's genuine. Brielle sensed it. The change. Not a complete takeover, but its initial stage. She began to notice hushed conversations that excluded her. Praise that wasn't directed at her. The shifts were minor, yet they caused her distress. That afternoon, she confronted Ayana near the science wing. Ayana was walking alone, wearing earbuds and a hoodie. She paused when Brielle blocked her path, arms crossed. You think you're clever, huh? Brielle said. Ayana removed one earbud. What? Are you trying to go viral now? Playing the humble angle? Ayana blinked deliberately. I didn't post that video. Brielle let out a scoff. It seemed like a coincidence that this appeared just as people started calling her strange. Ayana remained still, composed. You know what your problem is? Brielle moved closer. You carry yourself as if you're above speaking to anyone, and then you act surprised when people don't care for you. I don't act surprised, Ayana replied quietly. Brielle's cheeks reddened. She glanced around. Several students nearby had paused, observing, watching, waiting. I'm warning you, Brielle hissed. Ayana turned to leave. Then Brielle pushed her. The push wasn't forceful, but it was calculated, public enough to draw attention, and loud enough to elicit gasps. Ayana faltered slightly, regained her balance, and turned to face Brielle. They held each other's gaze for a drawn-out moment. Subsequently, Ayana reacted. She avoided striking Brielle Instead, she intercepted the subsequent push with such speed that Brielle's wrist rotated, throwing her off balance. Ayana then moved to her side and resumed her position. The entire exchange concluded in fewer than 3 seconds. The incident was recorded on a phone. It captured the precise moment Ayana's foot landed, the subtle movement of Brielle's arms, Ayana's stillness, her unwillingness to retaliate. This new video surpassed the initial one, spreading rapidly. By that evening, news organizations had begun contacting Roosevelt High. Some described it as a display of controlled self-defense. Others characterized it as the moment the reserved girl silenced everything. Ayana remained silent, making no social media posts or tweets. She remained silent regarding the online discussions. She simply attended school Tuesday morning, holding her head high and with her hoodie unzipped. Surprisingly, there was no laughter, neither in the hallways, nor in the cafeteria, and not even within the group chats. Brielle, however, struggled to reach third period before others began to avoid her. This wasn't due to fear, but rather embarrassment. The question lingered. Why would she push her? What prompted her to touch her? Everyone saw the video. Ayana hadn't even thrown a punch. Brielle attempted to explain. She tried to make light of the situation. No one paid attention. And for the first time in her life, Brielle Wentworth felt truly observed. Not in the manner she had constructed her existence. However, the significant consequences were yet to unfold. They wouldn't start until individuals began taking sides. By midweek, Ayana Brooks was a name recognized beyond Sacramento. A local channel broadcasted the video, presenting a brief report. Student defends herself with poise after being confronted at school. The martial arts studio in Vallejo shared a clip of her, commending her technique and poise. A Reddit user discovered earlier footage of her competing in a junior nationals tournament when she was 10 years old. She had secured gold. Consequently, Ayana transitioned from being a reserve scholarship student to a subject of public attention. At Roosevelt High, a palpable change occurred. Teachers discussed her in break rooms, and guidance counselors conducted private meetings. Several parents emailed the school, inquiring about plans to handle bullying following recent occurrences. Brielle was experiencing a significant amount of it. She attempted to appear unaffected, arriving at school wearing sunglasses and large hoodies, feigning a lack of distress. However, the pain persisted. Each time someone ignored her, each time Ayana's name was mentioned without including hers, she felt deeply hurt and recalled Mr. Daniels' words. Courage sometimes is saying nothing at all. Demonstrating his actions through silence, he looked towards Ayana, who remained unengaged. Brielle felt a constriction in her chest. During lunch, she joined Mackenzie and Zach, but the table felt desolate. Discussions became uncomfortable. People avoided mentioning the unspoken, that perhaps Brielle had overreacted, that perhaps Ayana was not at fault. Compounding the situation, her supporters began to criticize her. The remarks on her most recent post were harsh. Didn't you push her? Why are you upset that she's talented? You've contributed to why people distrust popular girls. Brielle deactivated her comments, then her DMs, then her account. At home, she forcefully closed her laptop and tossed her phone across the room. Her mother gently knocked, opened the door slightly. Would you like to talk? No. You've been unusually silent recently. I'm Fine. You're not. I said I'm fine. Silence. Then her mom's voice, soft. You know, sometimes when it feels as though everything is falling apart, it's simply the truth revealing itself. The door closed again. Returning to school, Ayana remained unchanged. She carried herself without needing to demonstrate anything. Her clothing was the same. She showed no signs of boasting. She didn't mention the events that transpired. She simply proceeded through the day as before. That silence, which Brielle had previously disliked, was now the quality people admired the most. She was no longer simply the girl who kicked. She was something more, something Brielle had never taken the time to comprehend. Even Ethan observed this. He located her close to the lockers on Thursday afternoon, immediately following class. You okay? He inquired. Ayana offered a weary smile, acknowledging his presence. You know people are supporting you, right? He continued, I'm not attempting to create factions. Ayana responded, I understand. But you unintentionally did, he stated, simply by remaining still. She hesitated. I didn't desire any of this. He replied, I know. Nearby, Brielle observed their conversation. For the initial time, she wasn't experiencing anger. Instead, she felt bewildered by the recognition Ayana was receiving. It wasn't popularity, it was genuine respect. It lacked fanfare and wasn't staged. It required no enhancements or labels. It simply existed. Brielle sat in her car after school, observing her reflection in the rearview mirror. Not the mascara or the precise eyeliner, not the carefully constructed image she typically presented. Just a girl uncertain of her identity without the attention. But even she couldn't escape the upcoming moment, the one that would ultimately compel a discussion neither of them was prepared for. The rain fell steadily on Friday as Brielle uttered the words that surprised everyone, even herself. She discovered Ayana standing beneath the shelter outside the East Gym, waiting for her bus amidst the storm. Most students had already departed for the day. Brielle paused for a moment, her designer boots already wet, her hair beginning to frizz. Ayana noticed her approach, but remained still. I need to speak, Brielle said, her voice quiet. Ayana blinked. Then speak. I was wrong, she said. I'm not saying that for the internet or to fix my reputation. I didn't know how to deal with you, Brielle continued. You were quiet, intelligent. People appreciated you without any effort on your part. That worried me. You don't need to offer an explanation, Ayana stated. Actually, I do, because I invested months believing I had to be everything, constantly. Flawless, boisterous, well-liked. And then you arrived and didn't attempt to be anything other than yourself. Yet people still acknowledged you, as if you were significant. I don't need you to like me, Ayana said softly. I know. That's why it affected me. The rain continued to fall. Ayana folded her arms. You humiliated me. Openly. On multiple occasions. I know, Ayana replied. You caused people to believe I was vulnerable. I initially thought you were, Brielle confessed. But you're not. A silence followed. I've been observing that video, Brielle added. Not the one where you blocked me. The other one. At the gym. You appeared focused. In control. As if nothing could disrupt you. Ayana looked at her, her expression unreadable. Why now? She asked. Because I finally stopped talking long enough to listen, Brielle responded. At that moment, Ethan appeared, standing a few feet away with his backpack over one shoulder. He didn't interrupt. He simply looked at Ayana, as if assessing the situation. Ayana gave him a slight nod before turning back to Brielle. I don't need an apology. I needed space. You've already taken enough, Brielle said, biting her lip. So we're just done? Ayana stated. We were never anything. You don't have to be the antagonist in your own narrative. However, I am not here to be your path to improvement. Brielle remained silent. There was nothing further to communicate. She turned and proceeded into the rain. Ayana lingered for a moment, simply inhaling. Afterward that evening, she settled on the couch with her mom, wearing warm socks and a throw blanket. How was school? Her mom inquired. Ayana paused. Complex, her mom replied with a smile. Isn't that just life? Ayana chuckled. A gentle, genuine one. Roosevelt faced challenges, yet progress was evident. Mr. Daniels began incorporating essays centered on character development. Students who had previously remained silent were now addressing instances of minor misbehavior. Even the school board initiated a limited program focusing on bullying, student support, and mental health. However, the most significant shift was in the way individuals interacted. They observed each other with curiosity, rather than pity or a focus on social standing. At some point, the quiet began to offer them a lesson. One afternoon, Mackenzie sat beside Ayana in the cafeteria. There was no apology, no casual conversation. Just two girls eating together quietly. It needed nothing more. And Brielle? She hadn't been posting as much lately. She began arriving to class promptly. She joined the yearbook team, working behind the camera, not in front of it. It wasn't about improving her public perception. She simply needed something genuine for a change. Ayana never went viral again. She didn't require it. She possessed what was essential. Her grades, her strength, her boundaries, her voice, even when she chose not to use it. However, the world hadn't forgotten, and neither had she. Certain events don't gain widespread attention. They remain with you. And that's where genuine transformation takes place. 2 months later, Roosevelt High appeared unchanged. Same lockers, same lunch lines, same morning announcements. Yet, a subtle alteration was perceptible. The focus that used to hold the greatest importance. Who possessed the latest shoes? The social gatherings faded. The meaning of respect evolved. It wasn't expressed through enthusiastic applause, boisterous cheers, online likes, or shares. Instead, it manifested in understated moments of genuine connection. For example, when a freshman dropped her books, four students immediately helped her without a word exchanged. Or when a newcomer sat alone, another person simply asked, "You want company?" While imperfections remained, people began to reflect more deeply. There was a deliberate pause before jokes were made, and a focus on checking in rather than immediately joining in. Ayana remained near the windows in the cafeteria. She continued to wear her hoodie on some days and still carried herself with a sense of self-assuredness. People now acknowledged her with small gestures, a wave, a smile, a casual greeting, not because they sought anything from her, but because they had finally recognized her for who she truly was. Ethan also stayed around. They didn't talk every day, but when they did, their conversations held significance. "You still training?" he asked one day as they walked out of school. "Yeah," she replied. "Every week." "Will she compete again?" She shrugged. "Possibly. Or perhaps not. I'm not doing it to win," she explained. "To focus. To stay grounded," she added, smiling. Regarding Brielle, she was still in the process of understanding things. Certain days, she reverted to previous patterns. The sarcasm, the desire for control. However, she would then recognize it, offer apologies when she previously wouldn't have, assist with tasks that went unacknowledged, share in someone else's humor without needing to be the focus. Change isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's subtle, quietly, internally. Mr. Daniels emphasized a point in class one day that resonated with both of them. Respect, he stated, is not something you demand. It's something you earn. Frequently, through how you treat people when you believe no one is observing. Ayana recorded the words in her notebook, not because she required the reminder, but because it felt like a meaningful return. People ceased inquiring about what truly occurred in that video. It was irrelevant now. They had witnessed the authentic story unfold over weeks, not found in video snippets. Instead, consider the decisions made. These actions carry greater significance than fleeting online sensations. The world continued, as it invariably does. However, certain students at Roosevelt progressed. They gained wisdom, developed empathy, and became slightly more observant. Occasionally, when unnoticed, Ayana would stop while walking down the hallway, observe her surroundings, and recognize a truth. She remained unchanged, yet those around her had evolved, and that was sufficient. Occasionally, the most impactful decision you can make is remaining authentic, even when all eyes are on you, anticipating collapse. It isn't necessary to be vocal to be acknowledged. It isn't required to struggle to prevail. And it isn't essential to alter yourself to gain respect. Allow your actions to demonstrate. Let your boundaries remain firm. And let your silence convey the significance that clamor cannot. If this story prompted a shift in your perspective regarding how we treat others or redefined your understanding of true strength, please like this video and subscribe. More stories are forthcoming that challenge assumptions and remind us that character isn't developed during times of ease. It's demonstrated when faced with adversity. Thank you for watching. Remain steadfast. She was simply known as the janitor. They ridiculed her for reading while she worked. Then they were stunned when she delivered the valedictorian speech at graduation, revealing everything. At Larchmont Hills Academy, everyone recognized Olivia Cranston and Camille Strathmore. It was understood. They were the daughters of families who traveled by private plane and ate at restaurants where the menus didn't list prices. Their presence in a room prompted people to either rise or avert their gaze. a reaction born of habit, fear, or envy. They weren't malicious, not precisely, but they understood early on that kindness wasn't essential. Politeness was a choice. Deference? It was reserved for individuals who could provide something in return. And for someone like Janice Albury, the reserved black woman with gentle eyes and rough hands, there was no advantage to be found. Janice had been employed at the school for nearly 2 years. Each weekday, she arrived before sunrise and departed well after the final SUV had exited the gated parking lot. She scrubbed the floors, shined the trophies in the main hall, and ensured the restrooms were fresh. She seldom spoke unless addressed, and her voice, when she did, was as tranquil as a still pond. But Camille observed something one day during lunch break. She had forgotten her phone in the chemistry lab, and hurrying back, she noticed Janice in an empty classroom, not tidying, but looking through a large biology textbook, her lips moving as if saying something softly. Camille rested against the doorframe and smiled. "I didn't think you were interested in science," she said. Janice looked up. "I'm just reviewing some earlier learning." Camille angled her head. "Are you going to teach now, as well?" Janice smiled. "Not precisely." It began modestly. There were whispered comments and laughter when Janice walked by. Camille told Olivia, and the two created a playful game from it. "Oh, look," Olivia whispered one morning as Janice wheeled her cart past their lunch table. "Einstein with a mop," Camille chuckled. Probably writing her thesis on floor wax. They laughed a little too loudly. Other students overheard. Some laughed with them. Others avoided eye contact. No one intervened. Janice kept her head down. It was her usual practice. The students overlooked the way her eyes paused on the school crest etched into the wall, her gaze thoughtful rather than resentful. They failed to observe her tendency to listen more than to speak, or her habit of keeping a notebook in the side pocket of her cart, partially filled with notes. One person showed her kindness. Mr. Del Toro, a literature teacher from Fresno who had a fondness for those often overlooked. On one occasion, he observed Janice carefully aligning the copies of To Kill a Mockingbird on a cart just outside his classroom. "You know," he remarked, "most people simply stack them and proceed." Janice offered a slight shrug. "That book warrants more than crooked edges," she said. He chuckled. "I often say that," he stated, then paused. "Have you read it?" Janice responded to his question. "Twice. Initially in high school, and subsequently, when I was mature enough to grasp its true significance." He never requested anything further, but from that point forward, he would leave a book for her on the bench outside the staff room every other Friday. No message, no inquiries. Nevertheless, the girls persisted. One afternoon, Olivia waited until Janice passed by, then whispered, "I bet she sleeps in the janitor's closet. Probably dreams in Clorox." It wasn't simply impolite, it was unkind. But Janice continued walking, and that disturbed Olivia more than anything. She anticipated embarrassment or anger, or at the very least a reaction. Janice's silence, however, felt inescapable. This made her a figure to be reckoned with. The lights at Northwood High typically dimmed around 8 p.m. Most evenings, though a few always remained lit, sufficient to create long shadows across the marble corridors. It was during these hours that Janice seemed to transform. As the classrooms fell silent and the usual teenage bustle subsided, she would move her cart into the supply closet, change into a clean shirt, and bring her notebook to room 114. Room 114 was no longer designated for a specific class. It had a flickering light and one desk leg shorter than the others. Most teachers steered clear of it. However, Janice had adopted it. The door did not lock, and that was acceptable. She didn't require privacy. She simply needed space. She would retrieve her laptop, a 6-year-old Dell lacking the N key, and sign into her coursework. She was 6 credits shy of finishing a degree in educational leadership through an accelerated adult program offered by the same university that operated Larchmont Hills Academy. A small, understated provision located within the staff handbook provided full scholarships to employees who worked a minimum of 30 hours a week. Most staff members overlooked it. Janice had not. It wasn't about ambition at this point. The focus was on completing a project that had been halted years prior. This was a time when she possessed a child, a husband, and a secure job in Maryland, only to lose all three within 18 months. Life has a way of deflating you before you're aware you've been holding your breath. She never expressed her struggles to anyone. It wasn't a behavior she'd been taught. Occasionally, late at night, she would receive a message from her sister in Detroit. You sleeping or still playing superhero? Janice would respond with a photo of her textbook and a brief message. Chapter 6 is proving difficult. Her sister would then send a laughing emoji, followed by, "You're still the smartest person I know. Don't let those stuck-up girls get to you." She never shared with her sister the full extent of the difficulties. She omitted the incident where Camille accidentally knocked over the bucket of dirty water and seemed to find amusement as Janice knelt to clean it. There was also the incident when Olivia confided in a group of parents during a school tour, suggesting the institution favored hiring individuals with charitable backgrounds. Yet, Janice persisted. She consistently arrived 5 minutes early. Her car was always spotless, her uniform immaculate. She possessed patience but lacked innocence. Her understanding of the school's customs surpassed that of the students. Beneath the refined wooden interiors and carefully selected diversity pamphlets, there existed a decay. Not everyone, naturally, but sufficiently pervasive to permeate the atmosphere. Janice had no intention of rectifying it. Her task was simple: observe, listen, and document. Unbeknownst to the students, and even the staff, Janice had been selected for a role extending beyond cleaning floors. 2 years prior, following an internal report alleging the Academy's neglect of racial and economic discrimination, the Board of Trustees approved a discreet strategy. They decided to place someone within the school, silently. Someone who wouldn't attract attention. Someone who could witness everything. While working part-time at a community college in Oakland, Janice received a job offer. The position came with no title or special privileges, simply an ID badge, a mop, and a defined purpose. That purpose was to observe, to take notes, and to document the patterns of behavior that were not able to be captured in policy memos or camera footage. The work was not glamorous. However, it was significant. And late at night, with her coursework open in one window and her field notes in another, Janice recorded everything. It wasn't only the cruelty, but the indifference, the smiles that vanished the moment someone turned away. She also wrote about the good teachers, the limited number of students who met her gaze. She recalled how Mr. Del Toro left that copy of Beloved with a sticky note that said, "For someone who understands silence." Still, each shift drained her, not from the labor itself, but from a necessity of feigning. She bore their ignorance as a second uniform, and with each passing day, it became increasingly burdensome. A change was on the horizon, though not as they anticipated. By early spring, the students at Larchmont Hills Academy were already largely disengaged. Señoritas had arrived gradually, like a dense fog, subtle, pervasive, and self-satisfied. Olivia and Camille frequently spent their days in the senior lounge, examining college acceptance emails and making critical remarks about those they perceived as inferior. However, subtle comments were no longer sufficient. The initial excitement had faded. They desired a significant reaction. On a Monday morning, Camille entered the admin office and pretended to be worried. "I think the janitor's been stealing test copies," she whispered to the front desk clerk, making her voice sound very low. "I saw her in a classroom late at night, alone." Ms. Robbins looked surprised. "Janice, are you certain?" Camille adopted her most innocent expression. "I don't want to cause problems for anyone, but this school is supposed to be secure, isn't it?" It was a carefully planned action. If anything resulted from it, so much the better. A sense of unease lingered. That afternoon, Janice was summoned to the operations office. The interaction was presented as a standard procedure with no direct accusations. She remained composed as the facility's manager reviewed his notes, visibly ill at ease. "We simply wanted to inquire if you've been present in unoccupied classrooms during your shift," he stated. "I clean all classrooms assigned to me." Janice responded directly. "Yes, but do you remain longer? For any purpose?" He maintained eye contact. "I complete my assigned tasks." Occasionally, I require a brief respite, as do most people. He acknowledged this with a nod and made a note. Very well, that concludes the discussion. Janice rose. Should any questions arise regarding my work, I would welcome a straightforward discussion. The gentleman's cheeks flushed slightly. There are no concerns. Simply, you understand procedure. It was a flimsy fabrication, and both were aware of it. Outside the office, Janice located Camille resting against the wall, feigning interest in her phone. The smile offered was not amicable. Everything satisfactory, Miss Albury? Her tone was saccharine. Janice remained unmoved. It was more effective than one might expect. Camille's face faltered briefly, then quickly returned to its characteristic sneer. However, this was no longer a trivial matter. Camille and Olivia had matured observing individuals evade consequences. This fostered their confidence and impulsiveness. 2 days elapsed before Olivia planned a further incident. She let a silver necklace fall near the janitor's closet and then dramatically announced its disappearance from her locker during lunch. A small crowd assembled. She raised her wrist in a theatrical gesture. "I'm certain I had it in there earlier today," she declared. "I suppose it could be lost permanently," Camille observed. Their friends chuckled, some visibly anxious. "Perhaps check the mop bucket," they joked. However, when one of the admin staff overheard the remark and volunteered to investigate, Olivia quickly recanted. "No, I'm sure I simply misplaced it. It's nothing significant," she said. The immediate concern subsided, but the awkwardness remained. That evening, Mr. Del Toro walked past Janice in the hallway. He stopped. "You're doing okay," he said. Janice looked up from her card. "You've been here long enough to know the games these kids play," he sighed. "Too long sometimes." There was a pause. "Is there anything I can do?" She thought for a moment. "Keep doing what you're doing. That's rare enough." What neither of them knew, what no one knew, was that Janice had already sent her first internal report to the board. Documented dates, quotes, and behavior patterns were observed. Names redacted for now, but she wasn't the only one being monitored anymore. An independent firm had initiated discrete audits. These audits included interviews and surveys presented as student engagement questionnaires. Camille and Olivia believed they had complete control over the school, but attention was shifting. Rumors began to change their focus. Despite this, the girls continued their actions. Cruelty had developed into a pattern, and patterns are difficult to change when they have never faced repercussions. Then, one Friday, Janice heard something that stopped her. In the lounge, behind a cracked door, Camille was speaking to a boy from the tennis team. "You know that janitor, Janice?" she said. "My mom says people like her are just here to make the place look diverse." She referred to it as optics. The boy laughed. Olivia added, "My dad said the school's bleeding money giving those scholarship perks to staff. It's basically charity," Camille scoffed. Unable to repair the situation with books, Janice stood quietly, 1 foot still in the hallway, one hand gripping the edge of her cart. She said nothing, but something within her shifted. She had been patient long enough, but now she had everything she needed, and it was almost time to show them. Before she was sweeping floors under fluorescent lights, Janice Albury had been someone else entirely. 12 years prior, she held the position of Director of Curriculum Development for a public school district in Maryland, known then as Janice Simmons. Her responsibilities included managing a corner office, overseeing 3 staff members, and proudly displaying a plaque from the state superintendent. She was married and a mother. Life at that time possessed a sense of order and comfort. However, that changed with a tragic event. Her husband Carr was struck by a delivery truck on I-83 during a snowstorm. He perished in the accident. Her daughter, Kira, who was 6 years old at the time, survived, though with significant injuries. After 2 months spent in a hospital bed, Janice faced a year of surgeries and rehabilitation. While insurance covered a significant portion of the expenses, some costs remained. Janice drew upon her savings, her retirement funds, and ultimately sold their home. Following this, Kira developed pneumonia, which tragically led to her passing. Janice resigned from her job 2 weeks following the funeral. The sight of a school brought back the image of Kira's empty chair, and the sound of children's laughter in the hallways served as a painful reminder of her loss. She moved around, taking temporary work, staying with friends, then in rented rooms, ultimately settling into a small studio apartment in Antioch, California. Despite these changes, she consistently read and continued learning. This pursuit led her to discover a program, a little-known educational equity initiative offered through a university partnership, representing a fresh opportunity. When asked if she would agree to work undercover to examine behavioral differences between students from privileged backgrounds and faculty perspectives, she readily accepted. She acted not out of financial need, but because the system had let down too many individuals resembling her. She refused to accept this inaction. Applying for the janitorial position using her maiden name, she successfully completed the background checks, keeping her degree and credentials secured in a folder at home. Initially, her goal was simply to observe and listen, to remain unnoticed. She had no plan to participate. The incidents she witnessed were disheartening. A senior teacher deriding a student with a speech impediment under the assumption of privacy. Discussions about a girl's financial aid occurred at a staff meeting, presented as a personal failing. Then there were Camille and Olivia, whose parents' substantial donations had secured the gymnasium's naming rights in honor of a hedge fund. Their self-assurance stemmed not from conceit, but from a sense of privilege. Janice felt disheartened by what she observed. Eleanor Larchmont, the school's founder, had originally conceived of the academy as a place for future leaders from all backgrounds. However, that original vision had diminished over time, obscured by financial influence, promotional efforts, and preferential admissions practices. Consequently, Janice began her work. Her notebook rapidly filled with detailed observations, specific dates, recurring linguistic patterns, staff reactions. She consistently attended faculty meetings when possible, choosing to sit in the rear of the room. She posed inquiries that prompted discomfort among those present. She took on committee assignments that others avoided. Steadily and carefully, she became the source of information the board required. And during evenings, as the halls became vacant, she studied. She wasn't simply observing, she was revitalizing herself. Each finished module advanced her progress toward that second degree. Each submitted essay felt like rediscovering a part of the woman she once was. During one evening spent reviewing a case study about institutional gatekeeping, a particular sentence caught her attention. It stated that genuine authority doesn't proclaim itself, it waits to be recognized. She emphasized this line with underlines. Graduation was approaching rapidly, just 3 weeks away. She had finished the program without drawing much attention. Her grade point average ranked her among the highest in her group. The board had previously approved her to address the audience. Camille and Olivia continued to walk through the halls with an air of confidence, unaware of what was about to unfold. The faculty, too, were on the verge of a realization that learning extends beyond the classroom. Janice had observed them for 2 years. Now, she was poised to step forward, taking the central position, and they would be completely surprised. That morning, the sky above Antioch was clear, excessively bright considering the anxiety some individuals brought into the Larchmont Hills Academy auditorium. Families occupied the seats, proud parents filled with anticipation and clutching phones, surrounded by flowers, ties, and costly perfume. The scene appeared flawless. Camille Strathmore wore a champagne-colored stole that her mother had flown in from France. Olivia Cranston had her hair professionally styled before dawn, her makeup applied to endure the entire day. They smiled for photographs, laughed with joy, and stood with the grace of young women who'd been raised to believe the world was within their reach. Behind the scenes, Janice remained still in her black robe. There were no embellishments, no unnecessary details. She declined the academic award the committee presented, stating she had no need for it. What she desired was a single moment, just one, and that moment had arrived. The dean, Dr. Leonard, approached her, holding a program. "Ready, Ms. Albury?" She met his gaze. She had been prepared. He offered a restrained smile and returned toward the podium. Camille and Olivia did not even look at her, as they passed by in their elegant gowns. It was understandable. She was unnoticed once more, simply an element of the surroundings. The ceremony commenced as it always did. Names were announced, families applauded, and speeches were delivered. The school's jazz trio performed something gentle and unremarkable. Subsequently, Dr. Leonard approached the microphone. As we approach the end of this year's commencement, we have a particularly noteworthy announcement, one that, intentionally, has remained private until this moment. Students adjusted in their seats. Parents moved closer. Even faculty appeared puzzled. This year, the Board of Trustees authorized a confidential academic pilot program meant to enable working staff at our institution to pursue higher education with complete anonymity. The program demands both academic excellence and professional integrity of the highest order. Camille glanced at Olivia. Olivia showed a frown. Murmurs began behind them. Dr. Leonard proceeded. We are pleased to announce that the highest academic honor this year goes not to a student you might have learned alongside, but to someone many of you overlooked. He paused, then stated distinctly, "Please welcome Janice Albury, this year's valedictorian." A stillness hung in the air. Then, with a suddenness like a glass shattering in a quiet room, the news arrived. People turned their heads, their mouths agape. Camille remained motionless, her expression rigid. Olivia blinked, then attempted a laugh, only to find herself laughing alone. Janice proceeded deliberately to the stage. Her movements were controlled, her posture upright. She avoided looking at the assembled group until she reached the podium. Then, she surveyed the audience slowly, her gaze finally fixing on Camille and Olivia. Following this, she began to speak. I arrived at this school with a mop in one hand and a question lingering in my thoughts. Her voice resonated, strong and clear, without any doubt. I found myself questioning the true nature of this institution. Beyond the official statistics, the promotional materials, and the presentations, I wanted to determine if respect was readily available here, or if it was something that needed to be gained only by those who possessed the appropriate attire, footwear, and family names. The auditorium was completely silent. I dedicated countless evenings tidying up after those who spoke negatively about me. And when they observed me reading a book or attending a classroom session after hours, they mocked. She paused. However, my focus extended beyond mere reading. I was observing, studying, not solely to earn a degree, but to uncover solutions. She turned slightly toward the faculty, and now I possessed them. Students surveyed the room, adjusting in their places. Olivia's expression remained inscrutable. Camille clutched her program firmly, her knuckles white. Janice lifted her chin. I stand here today, not just as your valedictorian, but as a reflection of the very things that Elmwood High claims to stand for: growth, opportunity, and truth. But she hadn't revealed everything yet, and what she said next would change the room forever. You could hear a cough from 3 rows back. A chair creaked. A phone buzzed quietly against someone's hip, but no one moved to check it. A hush fell over the room as people leaned in, anticipating Janice's next words. She proceeded deliberately, taking a drink of water, briefly reviewing her notes, and neatly folding them. Then, she raised her gaze. I'm sure some of you are wondering how I came to be here. She began, gesturing to her robe and the podium. A few members of the front row, largely faculty, nodded in agreement, seemingly unaware they had done so. My presence here wasn't solely for the purpose of earning a degree, she added. 2 years ago, the university board contacted me following concerns raised, discreetly, privately, regarding the increasing atmosphere of class division and privilege within Ashworth Academy. They requested I consider a position, but not as a faculty member, not as a consultant, as a janitor. At this, the room shifted. Janice allowed the silence to linger. My purpose was to observe. Away from executive suites and scheduled gatherings, I observed. In the corridors, the athletic facilities, the classrooms buzzing with after-hours conversations where students felt safe to speak openly, believing they were unobserved. I was attentive. A woman among the parents visibly expressed discomfort. Over a period, I noted seemingly minor incidents. Yet, these minor incidents accumulated. I saw how some students treated those they perceived as outsiders. I noticed how the lack of intervention from adults permitted that behavior to escalate, and how some of you, who should have been more informed, chose to ignore it. She looked toward the staff. Some of you were aware, and you remained silent. The words struck with force. Camille's mouth felt parched. Olivia had ceased breathing through her nose. She remained motionless, as if blinking would make her vanish. The most troubling aspect, Janice continued, is that the behavior was not concealed. It was open, commonplace, accepted, and frequently it was encouraged, amid smiles, with focus, and with widespread recognition. She paused, taking a moment. I'm not here to criticize you. I'm here to offer a reminder. Her tone became gentler. You cannot determine someone's worth based on their clothing or their profession. You cannot assess dignity through financial status or lineage. She lowered her gaze briefly, then raised her head with renewed focus. I once had a daughter. Her name was Kira. She would have been your age now. A stillness fell over the audience, similar to a chilling breeze. She passed away before she had the opportunity to wear a cap and gown. I'm not sharing this to elicit sympathy. I am sharing it because I see her in all of you. I see who she could have become. And I wonder, if she had been here, would she have been ridiculed as well? No one dared respond. Perhaps not. However, what I know for certain is that if you depart here today, believing the world will defer to your name, you have already failed. She paused again. Education is not merely about books and tests. Remember how you handle the individual you believe you'll never require assistance from, because life possesses a peculiar tendency to shift unexpectedly. Subsequently, the final setback occurred. I have delivered my conclusive report to the board. My assessment has led to a restructuring of the scholarship program, emphasizing integrity and contribution rather than legacy. A comprehensive audit of disciplinary cases spanning the last 5 years will be conducted, and students involved in harassment, encompassing verbal and social forms, will be subject to formal reviews. A subtle vibration resonated from the rear. Several parents murmured amongst themselves, their voices becoming more audible. Janice moved back a little. This isn't retribution, it's accountability. She fixed her attention on Camille, then Olivia, who had lowered her gaze to the floor. And accountability is not swayed by the wealth of your father. However, that wasn't the finality of the matter, as repercussions would follow even after the applause subsided. The ceremony concluded with noticeably diminished enthusiasm compared to its start. Some students applauded, while others seemed unsure how to react. A small number of families, appearing uneasy, left the room before the conclusion. However, Janice maintained her composure, smiling as she returned to her place. It wasn't the back row where she previously observed, but rather near the front, alongside board members and professors who now regarded her with a noticeable change, respect. Camille did not speak as she departed the auditorium. Her father was already waiting close to the car, his expression stern, avoiding her gaze. Olivia's mother, arms crossed, stood by the valley in stunned silence. There were no congratulations, no flowers, just silence. Inside, a small crowd had gathered around Janice. Teachers who had previously offered only a polite greeting were now shaking her hand. Mr. Del Toro remained at a respectful distance, waiting for an opportune moment. You didn't simply speak, he stated when they eventually talked. You transformed the entire atmosphere. Janice looked at him and smiled softly. The air had needed changing. Upon the lawn, several of the younger students expressed their awe. A girl wearing a red dress confided to her friend, I wasn't aware she attended school, to which her friend responded, I didn't know she could articulate herself so eloquently. A sense of belated recognition began to spread, an acknowledgement of what had been missed, what had been consciously disregarded. That evening, Janice was in her apartment, with a plastic container of leftover chicken salad and the commencement program placed on the table next to her. Her phone buzzed. It was an email from the board's director. The subject line read, Thank you. The message stated, Your final report is being reviewed. Policy meetings begin next week. Your courage will shape the future of this school." She set the phone down and exhaled. It wasn't relief, it wasn't pride, but a quiet, grounded sense of purpose. The kind that didn't require applause or accolades. Meanwhile, news about the graduation speech spread quickly. A video shared online by a teacher's assistant was already spreading among parents and alumni. The title was straightforward: Janitor or Genius, Larchmont's Graduation Shocker. Regarding Camille and Olivia, Camille was required to attend a disciplinary review. Her parents were obligated to participate. A scheduled summer internship at her father's firm was discreetly canceled. It was rumored that she would be asked to fulfill community service hours before receiving her diploma. Olivia's parents initially resisted, indicating they would pursue legal action and requesting apologies. However, upon the school sharing portions of Janice's records, containing witness statements and documented incidents, they ceased their objections. Olivia was permitted to graduate, although her honors were removed. Both girls remained silent regarding the matter, but those familiar with them observed a change. The teasing ended, and the hushed conversations also stopped. The following fall, Janice received a new opportunity, the role of Director of Equity and Inclusion Initiatives for the school district. She agreed to take the position. On her final day, as she walked the halls with her cart, she placed a sticky note on the supply closet door. It read, "Respect isn't owed, it's revealed." With clean floors, clear eyes, J.A., and a final goodbye, she left the mop behind. Leaving Larchmont Hills, she wore a navy blazer and carried a satchel, not to demonstrate professional advancement, but because she felt no further need for discretion. 1 week later, she returned, not in a work uniform, but as a guest speaker for the new staff orientation. Standing at the podium again, she addressed the teachers, new hires, and assistants. "Your job title doesn't determine your influence," she stated. "How you treat people when no one's looking does." Her voice resonated to the back of the room, and this time, everyone was attentive because they finally grasped the meaning. Respect isn't about volume, it's about the impact you make. If this story resonated with you, if it prompted you to reconsider how we treat people, we believe it's sufficient. Subscribe to the channel, share this story, and discuss it. The world would benefit from more individuals with qualities similar to Janice's, and it's valuable to remember that the most reserved person present could impart the most significant lessons.